All aboard!
Hey, what's up, everybody? You're listening to Cannabis Karaoke, where we ask you to grab the mic and tell your story. Get inside info from today's most interesting cannabis pioneers, and from the first note to the end of the song, listen up as you get to hear the stories of success on Cannabis Karaoke. Welcome back to another episode of Cannabis Karaoke. And while we're on lockdown, I'm making all kinds of new friends. Like, I get all kinds of great people to come on my podcast now, and I'm super pumped. Right now, I get to talk to Abdullah Saeed. He's a TV producer, he's a host, he's a writer, he's an actor. He co-hosts a podcast, a really amazing podcast, Great Moments in Weed History. He's co-writing a film right now with a buddy of his, Ben Sinclair, for Fox Searchlight and New Regency. And he was the writer of the weekly column called Weediquette. You may have heard of that if you were a stoner. And last but not least, he was a host of Bong Appétit. Hey, man, we've been having some cool conversations in the background. I really, really appreciate you coming on and, giving me some of your time out there in good old Palm Springs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, Danny. So good to be here with you. And, crazy times right now, and it's really nice to connect with weed people as much as I have been through all the digital options that we have to kind of express the solidarity. You know what I'm saying? We're all still homies. We're all still getting high together.
Yeah, just unfortunately, no passing the ditchy on the left-hand side anymore.
None of that. No, but a lot of personals, which frankly, I was already on board with. You know what I mean? Right. I like smoking my own joint.
Now you don't feel bad about bogarting it. You just say, nah, dude, sorry. COVID, remember? We're not going there again.
Exactly.
It's funny. We haven't known each other too long, but we hooked up at the Emerald Cup. You were doing some hosting there for them.
Yeah.
And, it was just about time for me to go on and interview the infamous Tommy Chong, which was the
legend. I met him there, man. That was a great moment in weed history for me.
We can get him on that. If you want him to do that, we can definitely facilitate that.
Oh, that would be so cool.
Just be prepared, bro. It's like
lose his mind.
It's like walking on ice with that guy sometimes, He's all over the place. Yeah, he gets in there, bro. He's an 82-year-old man that don't give two fucks about anything. He's ready to go. And he'll talk about whatever you want, dude. I love working with him, man. That was a great interview we had. But we got to chop it up backstage a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about, because you're a varied guy. You've got quite the past in cannabis, and you've been part of some pretty heavy-hitting, journalistic things or, shows, however you want to classify them. You worked with Vice. You're writing a show. You're a comedian. Hosting cannabis events. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
So it has been kind of a newer chapter of my career, in cannabis, and sort of an unexpected one. I started out as a journalist, a columnist, and then, moved into doing TV production and hosting. Even in doing that stuff, I mean, I really look at it as the making of content, and the fact that, I made myself into a cannabis significant person almost feels like a accidental byproduct of that or something. I just love to smoke weed, you know what I mean? And then I think like getting to do it on camera, getting to sort of spread that, the love of cannabis among people, I feel very, very fortunate, dude, because like, the way I like to describe it is that it's like I have a little flag on my head, right, that only stoners can see. To any person in the world, I'm just a guy at the fucking supermarket.
There's a stoner right there.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, and people, like, I feel so lucky that stoners are excited to see me. You know what I mean? They're excited to meet me and stuff. And that has sort of led into doing a lot more events, meet and greets, like hosting stuff, like, just being present at cannabis events. And, every time I do it, like at Emerald Cup, which was very, very fun. I love working with those guys. It really is a great event. And, I'm just stoked that we have an awards show. We have like a nice, well done, like good looking event, you know what I mean? That we can all go to. And I really like kind of being there. Hosting is one part of it, getting on stage, making jokes and like, making everybody feel welcome and comfortable and all that. Like, I really love that part of it. I really love walking around and meeting people, you know what I mean? Meeting weed people. At Emerald Cup, I got to hang out with people from Alaska, people from the Northwest, people from the East Coast, people from other countries, who are all there. They had all seen some of my content and it resonated with them because they're stoners. And now here we are standing in front of each other. This is the only place where I can show up and meet all these different people. And I think I get a lot out of it. I think, like the people I meet get something out of it. And it just is all around it. It's a really positive thing. It's something that I'm leaning into more now, doing events. I was talking to a few different places about going to, do hosting and meet and greets at these big cannabis events until this whole coronavirus thing happened and shut everything down. Definitely hurt my hurt the bank for me for a little bit
Fuck
too.
you and everybody else, man. It's like
Yeah, exactly.
it's like a
That was
table reset. Someone just came up and cleared the table while we were sitting down eating dinner, and now we're trying to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, the game of Risk that we've been playing for the last
Fuck.
couple decades has been wiped off the board. Now we gotta
It's like
start
somebody
over.
walked in the room and tripped over the power cord and just
Yeah,
everything. And they're
exactly.
trying to find the plug to plug it back in, but it's dark and they can't quite figure out where to plug it back in. Well, that was a great PSA for Emerald Cup. They should be stoked on that.
Oh yeah, true.
I love those guys, bro. We have worked with them for the last couple years, probably 3 or 4 years, pretty solidly on filming and just, getting more and more involved every year. And, it's when I first started going to the Emerald Cup, I've been really good friends with the guys that, have for decades now that have been doing it. And, in the beginning, it was just like just kind of like a little festival, and it's just slowly progressed to what I would consider the mecca of cannabis. Like if you are in cannabis, if you're it's like the Grateful Dead of cannabis. Like, people come from all over the world to go to that show 3 days before Christmas. I mean, its whole design was based on, honoring the outdoor grower and kind of, so that's why it's in December. And, but it's
Yeah.
really, really turned into something that's, the best music, the best guests, like they got people like yourself coming through. I mean, it's just really I don't know if they expected it to get that big. I think they just kept going harder and harder. I don't think they had these ideas of grandeur. I mean, I don't even think they make any money doing it because it's such a humongous event and you're, kind of playing against the weather and whatnot. But it is, to your point, even being somebody that's been in cannabis for quite some time now, like when I go to the Emerald Cup, it is a chance to kind of be spiritual. It's kind of a chance to meet people that aren't there just to make money. Yes, there's a traditional show atmosphere where people have booths and, they're hawking their wares, but at the same time, it's a chance to really get down and just, I've made some really, really valuable relationships, out of
Yeah.
the parties at the Emerald Cup.
Yeah, man. And it's interesting. Like I think when I go to cannabis events, I just feel at home and I feel like I'm, among my people and all that stuff, right? And it was interesting. I don't think I ever truly appreciated it until a few weeks ago. I went and did a shoot with my friends at Network, a company called Network, NTWRK, and they set up a shoot at Juggalo Weekend, right? It was like an insane clown posse show, right? And if you're familiar with that world, it's very like, cult following, really dedicated, diehard fans.
Did you paint your face?
Yes, I did. I
No, you
wore like a
didn't.
crazy outfit, paint my face, did it all, and it was, we were shooting something, so it was like,
That's rad.
we were sort of doing stuff for the camera, but then in the process of it, I was like, oh, all these people, they chant like family and stuff. And it's like, I don't totally understand the aesthetic or the music or whatever, but I recognized like the kind of like acceptance, you know what I mean? Like they all just fell into, like, they were like, this is our world. And I realized that I don't notice it because I'm so far in it, but that's what cannabis world is like. To some outsiders, it might seem kind of esoteric or like a little weird or confounding, but to us, it's home. You know what I mean? Like we show up here and we see people that we haven't seen in a while. I realized that. I saw juggalos seeing each other, being like, "Oh, I haven't seen you since the gathering of, 2020 or 12 or whatever," right? And like, it's truly like that. I think how remarkable it is that I can go to a cannabis event anywhere in the world and walk around and I'll probably run into somebody I know either through the internet or in person in some capacity. Like that's our world, that's our cohort. And being an Emerald Cup, it makes me really happy. Or, any other cannabis event really that's well done. It makes me really happy to just kind of exist and be reminded of that.
Well, yeah, and I think just like the Juggalos, cannabis kind of gets an unfair shake. You hear about the
Yeah.
Juggalos, and everyone's like, "Don't let them have a party here; they will break
Yeah,
everything."
they're a gang.
Yeah, right. And in reality, they're just a bunch of people that all. It's kind of like a church. It's like back to being spiritual. I mean, churches are kind of built off the harmonization of all the people's energy in one building, going the same way, singing the same hymn. There is a power about that, and I think to your point, what you've been kind of stating is cannabis has that frequency that it's just nobody's posturing at a cannabis show. Like
Yeah.
occasionally you run into that dude that's or girl, whatever, that is like they really think they're the expert in the space. Everybody has them. But for the most
Yeah.
part, everybody's just cool as fuck. No one's really tripping. Like everyone's, hey, want to smoke a joint? Hey, come on in. Hey, nice to meet you. Like it's a really
Yeah.
if you can enjoy it and let your guard down and not be afraid, you don't have to smoke all the weed. You don't have to get super high. Just go check it out, man. It's like it's really is that comfortable feeling. I agree with you. When I step on the grounds at the Emerald Cup every year, right prior to starting, I'm like, man, I'm home. I feel good here. It's
Yeah,
really
man.
awesome.
Like my girlfriend is not a pronounced cannabis person. She's from California, so she's familiar with cannabis and cannabis culture. But she came with me to Emerald Cup, and that's kind of I think an interesting experience of the Emerald Cup is to like roll with me. You know what I mean? And like walk around and like, like everywhere we go, people are like, hey, what's up? Like, I want to get high with you. You know what I mean? And she had a really good time. She doesn't usually smoke in public or when we're out. It's usually like a home thing. But there, she was like hitting joints. We were hanging out with Bienenstock and with Elise, and we were like all getting high. And I was like, oh, that's great. Like a person who's outside of his culture can kind of like step in and live it and experience it. And you know what I mean? Like walk in those shoes a little bit. And she really liked it. She was like, she had a very positive takeaway from the whole thing.
No, I've definitely heard that from other people that, it was their first time at the cup. And this last cup, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the year before we had like Portugal the Man as a performer. So we had some heads. We had, I think
Right.
Doug Benson was there, Jay and Silent
Oh,
Bob.
right.
But this year just had this like I don't know if it's because they did that stage like in the middle of everything. Last year all the performances were done in that big kind of pavilion, which is a huge pavilion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which if you don't have a lot of people following, so like if we would have been in that huge pavilion while we were interviewing Tommy, it wouldn't have been as impactful as it was being right in the middle of like everything that was going on. So I think they paid
Right.
really close attention to how they delivered things. I mean, I know when we were on stage or you were on stage or anybody was doing anything on that stage, it was being piped around to the rest of the event through different video monitors so that it was
Right.
there was like a whole like kind of atmosphere that was created this year that was just the next level. And it's going to be interesting to see. Well, hopefully they can have it this year, but it's going to be interesting to see like where it goes. Ironically, and then I want to switch gears. Ironically, my buddy Jordan did a little Instagram live with Tim Blake last night, and it was
Oh,
just
cool.
it was just them two chilling. Maybe 20 people were watching, but Tim talked about the cup and what's next, and he leaked out that they're looking at doing something in Southern California, and I think they could really take it to the next level. I mean, look, man, God loves Santa Rosa, but they don't have enough hotels. They don't have enough, restaurants. There's really no nightlife. I mean, everybody's charged up to leave the Emerald Cup, and then the Flamingo Hotel was where everybody ended up, and it's
That
like,
place, the Flamingo Hotel, man. I definitely, I'm like, it's definitely like families who are there for like, I don't know what the other tourist
oh
attraction
God.
is in Santa Rosa, but it's definitely like families looking around and being like, what the fuck weekend did we pick to come
Dude, I
here?
keep expecting to come down one of the hallways and see that, a scene out of The Shining with the two girls or something. Like it's like that, and it's got this old kind of school nostalgia feel. And you're right, dude. There was, we definitely at the end of everything, there's always a couple after parties. It took me about
Right.
2.5 days to recover after those, but they, you're literally getting kicked out of rooms because you're next to somebody that is not happy with 400 people packing into a room and playing trance at the top of the volume, and so it's just it would be interesting to see how how it morphs into a SoCal event. You know, I know he's always going to keep it as a NorCal event, but I think Santa Rosa is, unless they, I don't know how much bigger they can actually go up there. You know, that was,
Yeah, it's true. And I think there's a lot of people who won't travel past a certain distance. You know
it's
what I
up
mean?
there,
Like, I
bro.
think,
Like it's up there to
yeah.
get there. You know, luckily you can fly into Santa Rosa now, and you know we were able to get Tommy in on that airport, but it's
Oh,
not
nice.
not easy to get up there, man.
Yeah, man. And also, there's no flights from Burbank to Sonoma or
No, you got
to
to fly into San
Santa
Francisco
Rosa.
and then still drive 2 hours. You know,
Yeah, I was like, forget it. Like every time I looked at the options, we were like, I think it's quicker to drive 6 hours.
they're all the
Like,
Goodyear blimp will drop you off if you if you book a seat on the Goodyear blimp. They'll circle over and you can paraglide into Santa Rosa. Um,
yeah.
you know, you've been working on something that I think I don't know. I feel like you have some passion in it. I can hear it when I'm listening to it. But great moments in weed history.
Oh
You do it with
yeah.
a guy he goes by the name Bean.
Yep.
Talk about you guys have good chemistry, by the way. Like you
Oh,
know,
thank you.
part of having two people together is being able to play off one another and know how to counterbalance, right? And
Yeah.
so when I'm listening to you guys, it's really fun to listen to the banter that goes back and forth, and it's audio, right? Like I don't know if do you guys do some video stuff with that,
We occasionally will do like a video promo or something, but
right?
it's really all audio.
Right.
That show, we both started that together because we wanted to do something independent, like completely, right? So he was at High Times for many years, and I was at Vice for many years. We both also did work for each other's respective publication. I wrote some stuff for High Times, being produced the web series of Bong Appétit. And we work together a lot. We've known each other a long time. Like basically, we met in 2012 when I had first started doing cannabis journalism at Vice. It was like that was when I created Weediquette. And then he had been in the trenches for a few years. So, I got to learn a lot from him. He told me all kinds of interesting shit. And really, the show stems from those conversations. It's like where he's like, telling me about stuff from the days of yore. And cannabis has been a really deep interest of mine for a long time. Like when it comes to the ancient cultural history of it in other parts of the world, South Asia. Obviously I'm Pakistani, so that is a really important important information to me. So it's like I was always able to kind of react with those insights that come from that, right? And that's really what the show is. When we started making it, it was like, let's do something that is by stoners for stoners. No Vice, no High Times, no fucking company, no, you know what I mean? No bullshit. Let's just make something that, why do we love cannabis? Why do we think it's interesting? Well, we're endlessly fascinated by these stories, by all these stories in cannabis history that just they blow your mind, and they also illustrate these other points of humanity, of human civilization, of politics, of culture. So that's how it started. We did one season independently, and then we've had a production company do our second and third seasons. Third season is currently airing. I think our second episode just came out yesterday. And yeah, I mean, it stays true to look. I'm a firm believer in the idea that good content is all around you. It's like whatever is real, whatever is authentic. If you put that out to the world, that's probably what's going to make for the best content. And the conversations that we have on that show, they're very real. Like we are actually just sitting there getting high together. We're two friends. We're both very, very passionate about cannabis, and we, share things about it. Bean researches the stories. I've researched and written a couple of the episodes. Sometimes we do like a switcheroo. He's very, very well versed in like the last century of cannabis, of cannabis politics, especially in the United States. I have a good breadth of knowledge when it comes to like the ancient history of cannabis. And we kind of, we just have a good time and do it, and people listen. And I'm very thankful for that.
What's the real quick plug? I think Stitcher is the best way to listen to that.
Yeah, it's on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts.
Okay.
It's on all of them.
All right. So people, while you're listening to this, and because everybody's ADD nowadays, go ahead and take a look while you're listening to us on your phone or in your house and go take a look and make sure you go subscribe to Great Moments in Weed History, because I like listening to it. Well, comedically, I'm a are you familiar with the term chuckle fucker?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so apparently I'm a chuckle fucker, and because
A
I did
male
radio
chuckle
for
fucker, very
I got
rare.
Ngayo granted me that name, and so I did radio for a bunch of years, and we would have comedians come through all the times, as well as like
Hmm.
rhythm hip hop artists, and I was cool
Yeah,
with the music side of it and whatever. I love music, I love all genres of music, but for me, like I really like the challenge of comedy and people getting up on stage and playing off the crowd and just
yeah.
performing,
Oh,
and
I miss
so
it a lot right now.
I track people. I remember when Joe Coy came through for the very first time, and Fluffy came through for the very first time, and these guys were playing San Jose Improv, which is a small little vaudeville kind of venue, like maybe 200 people, and
Hmm.
not always having success, or testing out the material for a Netflix episode or whatever, and
Yeah.
so I just really like comedian based stuff, and partly for the comedy component, but really for the interaction with the crowd, and just how they pace and everything about that. Anyways, so in listening to what you guys are doing, you get a combination of comedy, because there's a little bit of comedy in there, and then
Hmm.
the information that you're bringing to the table is it's super. I don't want to say or overclassify it as like super informative, but it's like very interesting. Like your
Oh, it's
latest one
great.
is Little Women Get Lit, and it's all about the high power edibles back in the day. And
Yeah.
nobody's really nobody know, like, so many people think, but now cannabis just showed up, like all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
here, and it's like, yo, dude, this shit's been on since like we've like started. Pretty sure
Oh,
God put down a plant on one side, and he put down the hemp plant on the other side, and he told Adam and Eve, don't fuck this up, and they
oh yeah,
proceeded to fuck it
totally.
up, and
Oh
so
yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it is really like, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, if you ask them, like I did a video recently for this company called Say, right? Which was like, why is cannabis illegal? And I answered that question. And a lot of people, if you ask them, you're like, when did cannabis become illegal? And they're like, oh, I don't know, like forever, like the Bible. You know what I mean? Like people they have no concept of how we got here. I think that's another thing that, as a cannabis person, I feel like we as cannabis people, we tend to look at the larger picture. We probably have done some psychedelics as well that kind of help us take a step back and be like, wow, let's be inquisitive. How did we get here? What's going on? A lot of people don't ask those questions. You know what I mean? And it's like, when we look at cannabis, like, this is literally something that was used across the world, including in America and in the West, as a medicine until the very early 20th century. And then it's like there was like it's the prohibition of cannabis is actually just a tiny blip in the
it's like since 19
14,000 year history.
it's like
Yeah.
barely 50 years old.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. And it is like, it's like 80 years old, about, right? 80 to 90 years old. And like,
But
when we think about that,
Nixon came in really hard, and then I think
yes.
Nancy Reagan just drove the nail through the coffin with her Dare program, which
Oh yeah, totally. And then actually, looking at that, like Bush 1 and Clinton kind of continued the war on
Clinton was the
drugs.
worst about it. He like put that
Yeah.
uh, punishable by death
Oh
over,
yeah.
like, I think
And then of
is it
course,
like over 900 plants, or what's the cap on it? Like,
oh yeah, I forget what it was. There was like a poundage or something
I
of
think it
like
was like
over which.
99 pounds. If it went to 100 pounds or
Yeah.
something, you were punishable by death.
Yeah, and there was all these like kind of very racist, changes to like to the policy. Of course, mandatory minimums were introduced in that era by none other than Joe
Yep.
Biden. Of course, and like it's there's definitely a lot of kind of fucked up history there, and people don't think about it. People don't think about how we got here. Even now, when you hear a politician say we need more research, that's a tactic. That's totally like, we would have more research if the same government that prohibited it hadn't barred research into it for the last 5 decades.
I
you know
hear
what I
when
mean?
I hear someone, yeah, absolutely. When I hear someone say we need more research, what I hear is I need to figure out how to fucking make some money on this before it goes
Yes.
any further.
Oh,
Because
exactly.
that's
Or
all
how
it
to keep,
is, you know?
yeah, or how to keep using it as a tool of oppression. You know, like we think about, you know, when we look at the prohibition of cannabis, a lot of people think it's about the cannabis. It's really more about social control. You know, in a lot of ways, it's like the police use suspicion of having used cannabis as a tool to search somebody and to detain
Especially if you're a
somebody
person of
without cause.
color.
Oh yeah, exactly. It happens way more to people of color. And I mean, you know, now thankfully those things are starting to change. But look, like just a few months ago, you know, in Austin, Texas, you know, like they decriminalized cannabis, and the sheriff did a press conference. He was like, "I'm gonna keep arresting people." And you know, and like that's like, oh wow, the police arresting people for laws that don't exist, right? For breaking laws that don't exist. In fact, in New York City, the same thing happened under Giuliani because in New York, they decriminalized weed back in 1977 in the state. And yet the NYPD continued to like paddy wagon motherfuckers
Yeah.
just for smoking weed on the street or whatever. It's like that shit was, they were breaking the law themselves. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude, all
Um,
those, I mean, half the reason why those guys don't want it decriminalized because then they can't just take people's weed for themselves. Like they got to now pay for it
yeah,
like everybody else, you know? So,
bro. Yeah,
and
so
it
true.
does happen a lot more, you know, in neighborhoods that are, you know, lower economically driven that are usually people of color. It's the way we've
Yeah.
systematically set up this country to take advantage of people. But it is unfortunate that even in these days, I think I saw a clip the other day about some dude was like sparking a joint in New York and just got the living shit beat out of him by like 2 or 3 cops for absolutely
Oh
zero reason.
man.
You pull kids out of a car, you don't need to slam them on their face because you smell weed in the car. You know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
unbelievable the amount we don't do enough. I don't want to tangent off on cops because I respect cops. They have a tough job, but they don't get enough training, man. Like it's we need to train them more to be a little bit like, you know, it's kind of like bar fighters, right? You always know you could take a swing, but like you should exhaust all the other efforts before you actually take a swing on somebody. You should try to talk to people. You should, I mean, I get it. Sometimes you pull people out of the car that are multiple murders, plus they have the weed, and I get it. You don't know what you're going up on, but if you're going up on every vehicle afraid, like you might not want to be a cop. Like you might need to take a different
Yeah.
approach. You know what I mean? And do something that
Seriously.
doesn't make you so afraid. You know?
Seriously, bro. Sorry, I'm just taking a little dab while we're on this conversation.
Great. This is gonna
Bro,
go really interesting now.
yeah. No, man, this fucking. So I have a Puffco Peak here, which was it was a gift from Roger, who is the head of Puffco, and
That's
it's a
rad.
really cool. Yeah, it's like a really
Puffcos are
dope.
rad.
Yeah, dude, they're fucking fantastic, and
They're
like
the only portable dab rig that people just whip them out. You're like, whoa, there's a dab rig. All
I
right,
know,
let's
dude.
go.
I swear, we got down here, and I didn't bring my dab rig or anything, and you know, I like we were watching Tiger King in bed,
Oh
and I
my
just had
God,
this thing,
how was that
right?
movie? Or
Yeah,
it's an episodical
it's
thing,
a
but
series.
yeah,
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 it's like a limited series. It's very like Florida. It's like Florida man stuff. You know, it's like the
yeah.
most ridiculous shit you've ever heard. But it does start to grate on you after a little while. But yeah, I just like I just sat in bed and clicked this thing twice. I made like a little cocktail of hashes and put them in the reservoir, and I just hit it like a bunch of fucking times. I was like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. Like,
Right? They definitely stumbled upon a pretty amazing device, you know, to because usually you have to break out the freaking crack torch and you got all these
oh
things and a nail and there's this a
yeah.
whole it's a little bit of a ritual to do dabs sometimes. Like it's not just pack a bowl and go. It's like it's a 10-minute setup process.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and the biggest problem with that process for me is that the torch is loud, so you have to pause the TV. You know, it's like pause the show. It's like I'm constantly like having to pause the show so that I can heat up the nail. And if I'm with my girlfriend, she's like, "Are you fucking serious? You're gonna pause the show again?" And then it's like the process to anyone looking at it, it's ridiculous.
it's like
It's
watching
like,
someone masturbate almost.
yeah, right. And it's like there's a
It's
very like
uncomfortable.
yeah, and there's a very brief period of satisfaction that comes with it.
Oh my God. So before we jumped on, Puffco, that's a great device. Get one, people. Hopefully they'll be a
Yeah.
sponsor later. So
Shout out Roger. Yeah.
shout out to Puffco, man. I love those guys. We were talking about content and like
Yeah.
delivery and, everybody being locked in their rooms and going on Instagram. Now, like I literally mentioned to you before we jumped on this interview that I can't even open my Instagram without just being hammered by accidentally hitting someone's live broadcast while I'm like
Yeah.
trying to search through my social feed.
Yeah.
We were talking about how this is changing. You had some stuff that you were talking about as far as, you
Mhm.
know, content manufacturing, how people are doing it. Do you remember talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is really a strange time. I feel like we're putting to the test all these platforms that, you know what I mean. Like we certainly used before, but now are much more reliant on. I mean, before like it doing Instagram Live or doing Zoom chat, it was like a functional option that you had, but a lot of times you would, not necessarily do that. I mean, it's good for those places. I feel like Zoom has really risen to the top by just being functional because think about this, man. You know how frustrating it is to have to be like talking to someone and have like the video glitch out
Oh
or
yeah.
like be like, "Oh wait, I lost you for a second." Like, Zoom definitely like functions a lot better and I feel like this is the trial by fire for all these platforms. Like Instagram, for example, has a whole lot of glitchy kind of things. You know what I mean? That
I
if you
couldn't
do
even
like
see
a
Tim
live with
Blake's
someone,
face last night on the Instagram live because it was so
oh really, it was all
blurry. Yeah.
pixelated.
Yeah.
Dude, that was I was doing a live with Roger, and it was like I was getting all pixelated and
I
shit,
saw
and
that
people
one.
were like, yeah, yeah, and people were like getting annoyed. They were like, yo, your internet connection sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like I feel like it really is a moment when those things are being put to the test, and also that it's funny if you're a person out there and you were like, I want to do a podcast, but I don't know what to do. Now everyone's just getting on regardless of the fact that they don't know what to do. So like now is the time to get on the air and fucking test it out. You know what I'm saying? Because like literally there's nothing stopping you. Everyone else is also sitting at home. While it has made a content creator out of everyone, it has also created a super content consumer out of everyone. So it's
Well, I
like,
know my screen time's gone up. I got the notice the other day. It's all you have 173% more screen time than last week. And you're like,
oh yeah, of
fuck,
course,
I'm a
man. And
loser.
your phone doesn't know you're cheating on it with your TV and your computer.
Right. And we are totally like, I mean, I think part of the problem with COVID, right, is that nobody, in fact, I talked to someone last week and they're like, there's just no way the whole world can shut down, man. There's just no way. And I'm like, well, we'll fucking see right quick here if it's going to shut down like we think it is. And
Yeah.
for the first time ever, like, I went surfing yesterday and there's still people out, but not very many, man. It's kind of weird. It's like driving on the 405 with nobody in traffic. It doesn't happen, ever.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, what used to take a 20-minute trip takes me 6 minutes now. And you're just thinking, like, how can society, in addition to people, now everybody thinks they're a content manufacturer, and everybody thinks that they can go IG Live and IGTV and, do podcasts and
Yeah.
whatever. But not everybody can. Not everything's entertaining. But you're right. People are consuming a way more content now. I mean, think about if you're Netflix or Hulu or any of these, what a great time for them to capture an audience when people were looking to cut the cord on cable. Now, you know I saw a meme the other day that someone posted. They're like, finish Netflix, what's next, and literally people are binge watching stuff. Everybody's gym. It's going to be like New Year's Day when everybody comes out of this thing. The gyms are just going to be like the next business to invest in because everybody's going to come out drunk and fat,
Oh
and
yeah, it's so true, man. And also it's weird. Like I feel like society is gonna be fundamentally changed because like who's gonna shake hands with anyone now?
or give
You
hugs.
know? Or give hugs. I think hugs are dead forever.
Geez,
I
that's
don't think.
sad.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't physically touched a person besides my girlfriend this whole day. It's so crazy. We were talking about this the other day. We're like, we literally can't. Like it feels so crazy. There's people out there who are not touching anyone at all.
I
There's
know.
single people holed up in their homes, and it's human touch is very necessary.
It,
Human
it,
touch is you need it.
I've gotten a couple messages from people where they're like, I'm low key freaking out right now because
Yeah.
because I can't do Tinder, I can't do Match, I can't do any of the ones that I normally did. I can't even casually go on a date. I think you're gonna see a lot of people, marriage and not to get you do a history show, so I'm gonna do some history real quick.
Hmm.
Marriage has always been like historically a fundamental need, right? It's only in the
Yeah.
last 100 years that marriage hasn't been a fundamental need, or not even 100,
Right.
maybe like 50 years, right? Like before
Right.
this, it was
Right.
like
Right.
woman find man, man take care of woman, woman serve man, man do what he wants, right? And that's like what
Yeah.
it's been for ancient, till ancient times, right? It's always
Yeah.
you got that vision of a caveman dragging the cave woman by her hair, right? And so that's what it's been. And in the last 50 years, between whatever reason, we have more people that are coming out in the as gay or whatever and not doing the same sex, so procreation gets thrown out the window and it's more about relationships. But
Hmm.
it's up until recently, like there's people like, yo, I'm just gonna be single, I'm cool, I don't need to do anything. But now they're like, shit,
Yeah. Dude,
I should have
exactly.
got a
Right.
spouse,
Right now, the incels are like, ha ha ha.
right.
They're like, this is what it's like. This is what it's like for us all the time. But yeah, it evens the playing field in that way for
There's going to
sure.
be, I mean, dating sites, gyms, and people going to AA are the things that we're going to come out of this
Oh, they're
this
gonna blow
COVID
up.
virus thing. So investment tip from myself and Abdullah: go ahead and invest. We're starting a gym together here after we do this
Yeah.
show, and we'll be looking for some investors. So if you want to invest in a gym,
Yeah,
we'll be good to go.
perfect.
Um, so what's next for you? I know you're writing a movie. You want to talk a little bit about that? Like what?
Yeah, so I'm writing a movie for Searchlight and New Regency with my friend Ben Sinclair, who's the co-creator and star of the HBO show High Maintenance. And yeah, it's actually something that we came up with like a couple years ago, and then have been kind of like trying to get a draft of the script out for a while. But it's like he lives in New York, I live here. It's he has his show year round. Like I'm busy with my shit. It's really hard to get the time to do it. And now suddenly we have nothing but time to write. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's kind of a remarkable thing that we suddenly are able to work on scripts, and that as well as a couple of other ones I've been working on, like that script. And it's been a great like kind of like moment of creative energy. Like I guess that's a positive byproduct of this whole thing, is that you're always, I feel like as a writer you're always trying to get shit out of the way so you can sit down and write. You know what I mean? And now I have the time to do that. It's amazing. I'm very thankful.
How does that happen? Are you guys just switching documents back and forth? Like, how does one go about writing bicoastally with somebody on a project?
Yeah. So essentially, like we work together for sure. Like pretty often, like we would like have a couple weeks or have like a month or something to be in the same city and work together. So actually, he was in LA at the beginning of this whole thing, and we worked on this, the project for like a few days. And then then we've been in quarantine in our own homes for like the last little bit. But it's still like we managed to get quite a bit done. We kind of like are working on separate parts of it at the same time. um and that, yeah, I mean, like so far so good, you know what I mean? Like it is amazing how much you can focus when there's nothing else going on, you
When
know.
and you don't have a name for it yet, right?
Not yet. There's a couple working titles. I don't want to say either of them because we don't know what it's actually going to be. But I can tell you that it's a prison dance film.
What? What? How did?
That's right.
What is that?
It's a dance film that takes place in a prison
So it's like a
mostly.
musical.
It's not quite a musical. It is like a dance film, like almost like you know, like
Like
Step Up to
Hairspray.
the Streets. Yeah, like no, well, Hairspray I feel like is more of like there's like songs, right? Like we don't
Okay.
none of our characters are actually singing.
Okay.
They're all just they're dancing, they're speaking through their movements,
Got it. And do you know
Yeah.
when, like, any sort of ETA and when you guys would potentially be looking to get? I mean, I know some of it is based on the creative flow and when you feel like
Yeah.
you've got the finished product. But do you guys have any sort of timeline on that? Like, or how do you put a timeline on something
Well,
like that?
I mean, honestly, right now we're just looking at the script and being like, let's get this done. As far as actually like productions, who knows? You know what I mean? At this stage, uh, shit could be held up for a while. So I don't know when it's actually going to get made, but we're at least on our way to having a complete story, which is really exciting. It's something that we've been kicking around for a little while. And it's a really fucking fun story, man. Like that much I can tell you. It's as wild as it sounds from the premise.
That's rad. Like, and what, like, being a comedian, you do, like you were saying, you struggle to find time to write. You had mentioned that this is a good time. Like, are you, besides working on that project, you had mentioned you got some other stuff. Like, are you truly, like, some people are locked up right now, like, as far as their creative flow, they need interactivity and to
Yeah.
be out there doing stuff, and they had a very scheduled kind of process that they were able to sit down and write. Now they're like, fuck, I can't do anything. Like, do you find that right now
Yeah.
you're like pretty motivated to write?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like the comedy thing is sad, honestly, because it's like I was really kind of getting my momentum back. I've only been doing comedy for like about a year and a half, and because I do a lot of other stuff, it's a little hard to like get the momentum going. But yeah, I was really in a moment of doing a lot more comedy and kind of building it up. So the fact that that's been stunted, I feel like I have all this creative energy that's got to go somewhere. Another thing I'm doing is I report for KCRW. That's the LA's NPR station. So I report on cannabis topics for them. So I've been doing a couple of stories.
Do
Like
you
I
have to
have
be
one
super
that,
serious for that,
you know what? Not super serious.
but not campy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like when you think of me, and like public radio, it's kind of like, wait a minute, how does that goofy stoner guy play on public radio? But yeah, I mean, they definitely are very welcoming of my voice, which I really appreciate. I report for a show called Greater LA, so that covers all like topics from Southern California, like LA City basically, and the surrounding areas. So, there's a lot to talk about in terms of cannabis. I did a story where I went to a sesh. A lot of people in LA are, not necessarily familiar with the fact that there's a very large unlicensed market for cannabis. You know what I mean? That's ongoing.
Like a little
And
speakeasy where you gotta like go through a series of people to get to one of those.
yeah, exactly. Where it's like you have to know somebody who knows somebody, and because of the work I've done in cannabis, I'm able to get access to things like that.
Sure.
And it's interesting to me that the reason I like doing these stories, right, is because there's a lot of people who are the public of Los Angeles, right? The people who this radio is for, who have no idea what's actually going on in their city. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's really important to me to speak to everyone in LA to be like, this is a cannabis city. This is a place where a lot of people, right, have cannabis as a regular part of their lives, and yet in public media, we don't hear representation of that. Ken Burns did 20 fucking hours about the origins of jazz. He didn't mention weed even once.
Wow.
Like, that's on PBS, man. Like, that should be telling the truth. It should be telling the whole story, but it's
Sure.
not. And I really, it's important to me to fill those gaps. That's another reason we do Great Moments in Weed History. It's to preserve the history, to report and preserve the history that will otherwise be forgotten, or at worst, stricken from the record. A lot of places just completely ignore. I mean, look, Louisa May Alcott, Little Women, right? Like, you'll hear a lot about Little Women. You hear about, oh, it was autobiographical, it was her life, but you won't hear about the story she wrote that was all about a young woman taking hash candy at a party and then getting lost at sea. You know what I mean? Like, all stoned. Like, that really fucking happened. And for someone who writes autobiographical, like, kind of a narrative stories, like, look, we're talking about a majorly influential American author from back in the day, right? Who was getting high on cannabis. No one's ever going to tell you that. No high school kid is ever going to read Little Women and get that piece of information, right? And it's relevant to a lot of people. To like, there is an endless supply of kind of tidbits and stories like that, and I think it's really important to get that stuff out there.
Well, first of all, 2/3 of the cannabis business is being done in LA, so that's number one. And then number two,
Yeah.
we've long since decided to paint, history in its best light, versus what really took place. I mean, uh,
Yeah.
I see, I have a 12-year-old and I'm, going through his history and it's getting better. But to your point, like, people leave out the salacious stuff or the stuff that they feel would turn people off. There really isn't a direct hit on what things were really all about back in the day. And I think that, you do have a good voice. Your delivery of content and everything. You're well suited to be exposing these historical events in a
Oh,
fashion by
thanks.
which people are like willing to hear it. You know what I mean? If you were there's 99% of delivering anything is the person delivering it, and if the person delivering it, the content doesn't hold water, if the person delivering it isn't worthy to listen to. It's like the guy from
Right.
Masterpiece Theater. I didn't even like half the shit that he would do, but I just love hearing him talk, And so it's nice to see someone like yourself who could just take the high road and do comedy and not have to really get deep, but you're getting deep and you're bringing something to people, and I want to thank you for that. And then the last
Oh,
thing,
thank you.
no worries, dude. And then the last thing I want to ask you is, before we wrap up,
Hmm.
all these people doing live shit, like the one, like you could do a live acoustical jam if you're a musician, and you could do some other,
Yeah.
but the second you try to do comedy over these things, like,
Oof.
how do you do it? You
Yeah.
need to play off the crowd. You need to hear laughter. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you don't know if your jokes are hitting. So, like, it's even worse for comedians because there really is, even though you guys have tons of content, it's hard to get that out there by yourself with
Hmm.
nobody really in front of you, right?
Yeah, so that is something I have not yet tried. I do not want to because it sounds like a bummer.
Oh,
Like a big part. I definitely, I commend comedians out there who are trying to push that format because it's the only choice we have right now. So I'm glad. I really wish there was a way where you could actually hear the laughs. Like I feel like if Zoom can put together a version of their platform where you can hear people laughing. You know what I'm saying?
sure.
Like that would be huge. I honestly, I mean, that would be fucking fantastic. If you could hear people laughing, I would do it. I would be able to deal with the 2 to 4 second delay, and you know what I mean, and like just work that into like how I actually
Do you
deliver my
like Bob
jokes.
Hope delivery? You just wait until somebody actually
Yeah,
laughs or not?
yeah, exactly. It's funny. I don't really do jokes like that, but then I think no matter what comedian it is, you end up having moments like that where it takes a second for a joke to click, and it's like I think that is actually a viable option. I certainly don't want to get up and do jokes without hearing people because it's like unless you're doing like one-liners, I just can't imagine they would work. Also, watching, I think you do need to hear a live audience laugh when you're watching stand-up comedy. I think there's a reason that when you see like stand-up on TV, it's in front of a live audience. It's not just a person talking to a camera. You know what I mean? So um
Even
it's
then,
I
it
think it's
loses its. If you're, I mean, I go to as many. In fact, when we get off air, I want to find out when down the road you would perform or where you perform, because like I said, I've gone to some like really really small shows and I've gone to some really big ones, and
mm-hmm.
for me, for the spectator, for the person that's there to watch the comedian, I think you need the audience there for you too. It's kind of mutual. It's not just for the comedian, it's also for the person watching, because we're all kind of going to get triggered by somebody else laughing at something that we may not have thought was funny at first.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's weird that we have to adapt this art form to this new thing. You know what I mean? I imagine that it'll get easier. I imagine that like it'll get better. I have nothing but faith in the ability of humanity to generate more digital conferencing platforms. So like I imagine that it's gonna happen. In the meantime, I'm going to wait. I am definitely bummed out that I can't do stand-up. It's something that I get a real rush out of. It's a relatively new part of my repertoire, but it's really important to me. I was just getting in the swing of things. I actually have tape from like a couple of shows that I did that I might just release. You know what I mean? Like a 10-minute set that's filmed well, just so that I have something.
Where did you do?
I mean?
Where did you do your set at?
That one, the one I'm talking about, was at Dynasty Typewriter in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great venue. It was Nick Kocher's show.
Yep.
Everything's great. And yeah, and it was it was like one of my better sets. I performed with a couple of really awesome comedians there. One of the dudes there was Whitmer Thomas, who has an HBO special out right now, but that guy's funny as fuck. Yeah, and I've just had like a really good set, and it was filmed. I think it was filmed well. I still am waiting for the guy to send the footage. I do have another one from my boy Neil Nanda's show at Westside Comedy Theater that was a good set as well. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I'm looking at all this tape I have of stuff, and I'm like, just once you're sitting around the house enough, you start itching to like release things, you know?
No, I'm looking forward to seeing you do some stand-up, and I just want to tell you, you know, you've given me now almost an hour. I appreciate your time. We can obviously chop it up forever about stuff, but why don't we wrap it up, and then let's make sure people know where to follow you on Instagram, and then the website or where you can find great moments in weed history. Let's just give a little reminder to everybody, and then we'll go back to locking ourselves up and doing dabs.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, so you can follow me on all platforms at I'm Your Kid. That's IMYOURKID. I'm Your Kid. And you can find great moments in weed history on every platform: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, whatever you want. You'll find it there. And you can follow us on social media. That's at GMIWH Podcast on everything, and on Patreon. And yeah, in this time of solitude, listen to some great moments in weed history.
We'll definitely make sure to point some people that direction in the blog that I put out with this. And like I said, man, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you.
I look forward to hanging out with you again and watching you do some stand-up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, dude. I'll talk to you soon.
That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to this edition of Cannabis Karaoke, another kick-ass podcast about all things cannabis. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and our website, cannabiskaraoke.tv. And if you or someone you know would like to be on the show, please hit the book your interview button on the right. Cannabis Karaoke. Grab the mic and tell your story.